Hello, everybody, and welcome to another tantalizing episode of Nessie's Dead, the show where we take a plunge into the darker sides of life, exploring our darkest curiosities. Here, we will be covering all sorts of things from true crime to conspiracy, paranormal, and cryptids, and all things spooky and absurd. We are your hosts, Spencer and Helen.
Hey.
Hey, yay! We're back. Little Miss Helen's back from a little vacation.
Yes. So I spent a week in Branson, Missouri. It was amazing. So many things to do. Everything is absolutely gorgeous out there. It's such a beautiful place, which is it's actually what gave me the inspiration to cover the case I have for you today.
Good. That was another thing I was very, very curious about. I was like, okay, is it going to be, is it from Branson, Missouri, or is it just Missouri in general?
It has to do with Branson.
Okay, so it's very specific to your vacation spot.
It's right outside of Branson, but there are some things that have to do with Branson within. But yeah, there was a couple of things I looked at, which kind of led me to do a true crime case this time. I was thinking I wanted to do cryptids or something, but not a whole lot unless we want to talk about Momo, which is kind of like their Bigfoot.
Wait.
Yeah, the Momo.
Isn't Momo Mothman?
It's the Missouri monster. It's called Momo. I feel like you do better when it comes to cryptids. Cryptids.
Here on Nessie's Dead, we cover true crime and cryptids.
Cryptids. I feel like you do better than that. Instead of doing something like Bigfoot or mythical creatures, I wanted to cover a very big case that takes place in Missouri. And this is called the Springfield Three. This, of course, takes place in Springfield, Missouri, which is the third largest city in Missouri and is located at the foot of the Ozarks. So it's very close to Branson, where I was. And it actually has been known for, of course, many outdoor activities. It's kind of a smaller community, though, even though it is like the third biggest. It's very tight-knit. People know who you are. So it is here in June of 1992 that 3 women would go missing in a very, very strange way. The 3 women were Stacy McCall, she was 18, Susie Streeter, she was 19, and Susie's mother, 47-year-old Cheryl Levette. I'm going to give a little bit of background here about each person that went missing so you can get an idea of their personality, who they were, which does come into play with some of the evidence and investigation in the end. So Stacy was 18. She was described as your typical teenager. She was very, very concerned about her looks, fashion, so she was really keeping up with that. And she was described to be very beautiful. She actually had done some modeling gigs for some local shops in the area, one of them being a bridal shop. And her main job, she did work as a receptionist at a gym. Her nickname was Spacey Stacy, which was kind of odd because a lot of people did describe her as being very intelligent, very smart, very responsible, even though her nickname was Spacey Stacy. She'd even received an acceptance letter for Missouri State University. So that's where she was planning to go after graduation. Now, opposite was Susie. Susie was 19 years old. She was described as very sensitive. Things really hurt her feelings quickly, especially if it had to do with classmates. She was also very routine, and she had a bit of an edgy style. Susie, she was dating a high school boy. He was actually known for being quite a bit of a troublemaker, and we'll find out a whole lot about that here in a little bit as well.
Okay.
They often did fight a lot. It was a very toxic relationship.
This was, which girl was fighting?
Susie.
Or had fight? Susie had, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of S's in this, so that's why Stacy, the preppy girl, and Susie is the edgier one, dating the troublemaker. Susie, though, was also really close with her mother, Cheryl Levette. They were so super close, they would even make each other mixtapes with special little love messages at the beginning of them. Oh. They always made sure no matter what, they would say goodnight to each other. So even if Susie came in like super late at night, she would go in and make sure that she kissed her mom goodnight and let her know that she was home, she was safe. Yeah, so
Cute.
Susie was even planning on following in her mother's footsteps after high school, and she had planned to become a hairstylist as well. The two of them, Susie and Cheryl, they lived alone with their Yorkie at 1717 East Del Mar Street and had actually just moved in 2 months before they went missing. Yeah, so newly moved in. A little
Graduation.
graduation. Now, Cheryl, she was born and raised in Washington. She married but divorced. She had 2 kids. And after the divorce, she decided when she moved out, she got an apartment. It was very difficult for her with the 2 kids and having a job. She actually told the apartment complex that she would do maintenance and help them clean and things like that if they gave her a discount on her apartment. She actually had no idea how to do any of this.
Oh,
So,
wow. She
yeah,
just
so
went for it. She was like, I'm going to make this work.
yeah. So she actually kind of self-taught herself how to do some of this maintenance work and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah,
Good
so
for her.
yeah, so it kind of gives you an idea of what kind of woman this is here.
Yeah.
She moved into the apartment, and not too long after, she met a man named Don Levette. They got married, and they had a very good relationship from what it sounded like. They moved to Springfield, Missouri, and they moved here because this is where her sister lived, and this is where she got her job as a hairstylist. And she had a huge clientele. They said she had hundreds of people that were on her books nonstop. So she was a very, very busy woman. But things go rocky in 1986. Don Levette, her husband, took off, leaving her with a lot of debt. Even the lawyer couldn't find where he had gone. He left. It was said as well in some things that the debt was caused from some bad business deals that he was doing. So whatever he was doing business-wise, he decided he had to disappear.
I just have to say, is he a suspect?
No, no,
Oh, because
no,
that to me sounded fishy.
no. After that, she moved along. The kids never saw their stepdad again. She didn't really let it affect her life to a point that she hit rock bottom or it brought her down. Even though she did lose the house, they had a beautiful house with a pool, and they had really worked on this house and to make it their own. Then after this is what leads her into the house on 1717 East DeMar Street. Back to the girls, Susie and Stacy. They were friends, but they were not best friends. So Stacy's best friend was actually a girl named Janelle Kirby. And they had grown up together. They had lived on the same street next door to each other. And Stacy and Janelle met Susie in the 2nd grade. Now, they became friends in the 2nd grade, and that time, of course, they were close. They're 2nd graders. But however, Stacy did move out of state, but she returned a few years later. At this point, when Stacy returned, this did change the friend dynamic a bit. So if you remember, Stacy wanted to hang out with more of the popular group, while Susie hung with more of the edgy kids. Janelle is what kept this friendship together. Janelle hung out with both Stacy and Susie, so there wasn't a whole lot of them doing things together, but more of Janelle was the middle person that bonded the group there.
Okay.
Now, senior year though, Susie and Stacy did start hanging out more. And again, they were starting to get a little bit closer, and they're kind of getting away from those high school cliques and not best friends, but much closer than the previous years, of course. The Kickapoo High School graduation took place on June 6, 1992. Susie, Stacy, and Janelle all walked the stage. Cheryl was also present during the ceremony. And after the ceremony, they were supposed to all go to like a steakhouse or something together. But then Susie and her mom decided they were just going to go home and eat pizza. So there were separate dinners. The group split off. Photos were being taken and stuff like that. Stacy was actually upset that she was running a little late because her mom kept wanting to take pictures, and she just wanted to get ready and start going out and celebrating with her friends. The plan at that point was for Stacy, Susie, and Janelle to meet up at Janelle's house. They were going to hit some graduation parties, and then they were going to drive to Branson, Missouri, rent a hotel, and go to the Silver Dollar City Whitewater Park. I drove by that so many times, and it's this ginormous, spectacular water park.
Oh,
It was,
that's eerie.
yeah, it was very eerie every time we drove by it, thinking like, oh,
Oh,
it gave me the chills.
adventure.
That was the place they never made it to.
It's like a normal place, and you don't think of it until something like that happens.
Until you dive into a true crime story and you realize
Yeah.
that's the place they didn't make it to the next day. At the last minute, though, they did change their mind about driving over to Branson and renting the hotel. They decided that they were going to go ahead and just stay at Janelle's house. Stacey did call her mom, Janice, to let her know the updates, the plans, and, they're not going to drive to Branson tonight. They were just having way too much fun at the graduation party. And told her that, of course, she's going to give her a call in the morning before they take off, touch base kind of deal. So
How
the
sweet of her. What a good kid.
I know, these seem like they were good kids. So the graduation party they decided to go to, they stayed out till about 2 a.m. And this party was right next door to Janelle's house. They also went to another party after that. There is small talk that the teens could be drinking, but
Okay.
let's be real. Even though the parents said they weren't big drinkers and Stacy didn't drink, it's a graduation night. It's a big celebration.
Yeah, and it's the 90s, and like, yeah, teens, of course, are still doing stuff like that, but it was like every teen party in the 90s involved alcohol, I feel.
Yeah. And I mean, it's their big celebration. And of course, if they've already decided they're not going to drive to Branson that night,
Uh-huh.
maybe that's why.
Yeah,
Now,
I agree.
like you said, it's the 90s. So it's very hard to piece together the timeline. It's not very clear. So we know that Cheryl spoke to a friend that evening. And it was said that she spoke to her around 11 p.m. And I believe that's the account of the friend. But police are saying it was more like 9 p.m., 9:15. So again, we don't have a very good timeline about Cheryl's evening, what was going on with her. She did, during this conversation, she told her friend that she was doing some home improvements, and she was stripping some furniture, which is a key important part here, and hanging some wallpaper as well. If you know anything about stripping furniture,
I do not.
okay. So if you're stripping furniture, you cannot do it indoors. There's a lot of fumes. You're stripping the furniture, so you're taking everything off of it. You're using chemicals. So it's not something you would do in an enclosure inside the house.
Okay.
Looking at the timeline now, we're looking at about 12:15. Susie and Stacy were reported to be seen at the party. This party, police did break up after a noise complaint at 1:50 a.m. Susie and Stacy and Janelle then, at that point, they head back to Janelle's house where they were planning on staying for the evening. But when Susie and Stacy got there, they noticed it was very crowded. So apparently Janelle had some family that had showed up from out of town, and there was really not much room for them there. So they decided they're just going to go ahead and go back to Susie's house. Susie followed Stacy in her car over to Cheryl's house. They reported to make it back to Susie's around 2:30 a.m. As both cars were in the driveway, along with Cheryl's vehicle, we could assume that everybody was home.
Okay.
I mean, this time, though, would be estimated. There's really, again, like I said, it's the 90s. There was really no way to track the exact timing. At 7:30 a.m., June 7th, Janelle then begins to call Susie to see when they're going to head to Branson, but she keeps getting the answering machine.
Ugh.
And at 9 a.m., Janelle and Mike is her boyfriend, decided to go ahead and drive to Susie's, knock on the door, and there was no answer. For 3 hours, they said they went back and forth several times
Back and forth,
to the house.
just checking the door?
Yeah, knocking on the door.
Okay.
But the first trip, when they went over there, they did notice something weird. As they walk up to the front door, they noticed glass all over the porch. And it was the globe around the porch light, so the patio light. So not the light bulb, just the globe around it had been broken. This was very odd that this glass would have just been left on the porch. Susie's mom was very tidy, very clean. She was the type that took so much pride in her house, she's not going to leave glass there on the front porch. Janelle, for some reason, was barefoot. I don't know why, but she was barefoot. Her boyfriend decided to sweep up the broken glass. They did notice that the front door was unlocked, but of course, no one was answering. Later that afternoon, they returned with a group of friends. One of the friends, Nigel, noticed that Susie didn't park in her normal spot. Susie was a creature of habit. She always did the same things and didn't really stray from that. She would only park in two places, right behind her mom in the carport, or if her mom wasn't home, in the circle drive, because she didn't want to like block her mom from being able to pull in and park the car. The fact that she was in the circle drive could indicate that maybe her mom wasn't home at the time when they got there, or maybe someone else was parked there. So it could mean nothing at all. I mean, especially if they had been drinking and maybe they were just happy that they made it over to Susie's.
This is something that could mean literally nothing, like you said, or it could be a huge thing.
Yeah, so it could mean a lot. And also, this comes back to the furniture. If she's refurnishing that furniture in the carport, she could have moved her car after the girls came home, moved it back into the carport, removed the furniture. There's a couple different pieces in the puzzle there. Was she home? Was somebody else there? Was it just the stripping of the furniture and she moved it back in later? It also gives some evidence that pretty much could also show that everyone was awake at the time, or it could show that maybe someone else was there. We really don't know. It's just things are not, they're not adding up to the way they normally would take place in a day by day with these guys.
Yeah.
Around noon, upon returning, the group does decide to go in the house as it was unlocked.
And I find it odd they took so long. Like, they're like, oh, it's unlocked, but they took so long to go in.
Yeah, we really don't know, like I said, where they're accountable for during this time, but they do return. They go inside. All three cars are there. But when they go in, they only find the Yorkie, Cinnamon, in the house. Cinnamon. Now, Cinnamon was acting very strange and very shook up. She went straight to Janelle. Upon going in, they do realize that the TV's on. It's left on static. A tape was left in the VCR. Basically, the tape had finished and TV went over to static. The vibes in the house were just very off. Just to give a little bit of a small layout of the house, Susie's bedroom was all the way in the back of the house. Inside her room would have been two windows and a set of doors to the backyard. Susie's room was also one of those sunken rooms. You had to take like maybe 2 or 3 stairs to go down into the room.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't really have much of that type of architecture in Texas.
No, we don't. And I feel like that was something that was really popular in like the 70s or something, to have like that sunken room.
It was. I love it. I wish that was a thing in houses still.
I do like a good sunken room. On the stairs going down into Susie's room, this is where they found all 3 of the women's purses. They were lined up. Susie's overnight bag was there as well. This also included Cheryl's cigarettes, lighter, and Janelle found $900 still in Cheryl's purse. So all 3 sets of keys were there too.
So not a theft gone wrong or anything, or a burglary gone wrong or anything like that.
Correct. Because
cash. I mean, I guess everything else is still intact, but specifically the cash.
Also, Cheryl was known not to leave. Like, she was a smoker. And if you know smokers, even if you're vaping, you're not leaving the house without it.
Absolutely not. Wow. No. Okay.
So we can rule out, of course, that, like we said, they didn't leave on their own accord. Maybe they left with someone they knew. Maybe somebody took them. It's really up in the air at this point. Why would they just not be there and all of their stuff is there? The teens, however, figure out, to them, I mean, they're teenagers, so when they have this logic, you got to think they're not thinking this is a crime scene. They figure that maybe they had gone ahead and went to the park and maybe they had just like missed them or something. They figured they would go ahead and go over to the water park and probably just run into them there. But as they're leaving, however, the phone rings. Janelle decides to answer the phone because maybe what if it's them? What if they're calling, thinking maybe some people will be over there? She picks up the phone and it's a man on the other line. This man is saying a lot of weird and sexual innuendos. So Janelle just hangs up the phone.
Ugh.
Right after she hangs up the phone rings again. She picks it up and it's the same thing. Now, the second call causes Janelle to remember that Susie had said she was receiving some weird prank calls prior, but doesn't even put two and two together, just kind of thinking, oh, this may be what Susie was telling me about, like she's getting these prank calls.
And well, what are the odds also that that this call comes in right around this time?
Exactly.
These people are there in the house too, which makes me think they maybe were being watched.
That's what I'm thinking, or trying to check in to see if maybe police are there already. Has anybody reported anything going on?
It seemed very strategic, this phone call coming in at that time.
Yeah, it does. There's also a third phone call. At this time, Janelle decides not to pick up the call. She lets it ring and she lets it go to the answering machine. Now, the person on the phone never specified who they were looking for or anything like that. Left a very lewd message again, lewd comment, same man on the answering machine. Unfortunately, this message was deleted. However, we don't know like who deleted it. The police claim they did hear the message before it was deleted, and also Janice, which is Stacy's mom, had heard the message before it was deleted as well. My guess it was accidental. I don't really know. It depends on what kind of answering machine they had, if it was one of those rewind and cleared itself kind of thing, or what was going on with that. But it definitely doesn't seem like it was purposefully deleted. Now, speaking of Janice, which is Stacy's mom, at 11 a.m., she is starting to get worried. She hasn't heard from Stacy, or remember Stacy was going to give her a call in the morning. And she begins to call Janelle's house. She is told that Stacy did not stay at the house, and she was told of the change of plans. She just assumed if they went over to Susie's, they're probably busy with friends, still celebrating, or maybe they're sleeping. Maybe she just forgot to give her a call. She kind of just lets it pass. The girls are graduated. They're hanging out. They had big plans today. 7 hours then go by, and she's starting to get like maybe I'm going to call Cheryl's house just to kind of check in, see if Cheryl's seen them. Are they off at the park? What happened? So she calls Cheryl's house and there is no answer. At this point, she begins to leave messages on the answering machine, and the messengers are getting, of course, more worried. And at around 5:30, she finds out from another girl that Stacy's car was at Susie's, but the three ladies had not been seen. Now she knows her daughter's car is there, but nobody has seen any of these girls. She decides to start looking around for herself. She tracks down Janelle, who had not gone to Branson. They decided to stay behind and go to this part called the Hydro Slide. Now, the Hydro Slide had like 4 little water slides. So instead of going to their big, huge event, they decide to stay and go down these little crappy slides at the Hydro Slide. She's there with some friends. And at this point, Janice hears what's going on. And she decides, well, we need to go over there. She sees everything the group had. She notices Stacy's shorts. Migraine medicines were there. Her jewelry was tucked into the pocket of her shorts. Her bra and swimsuit were still there as well. She did not find Stacy's underwear or floral shirt that she had been wearing. She did notice that both beds in the house looked slept in, and washcloths in the bathroom that looked like it had been removed to their makeup from the night before. It was definitely evident that it looked like they had gotten ready for bed. So, of course, if you're a girl and you're spending the night with your friends, usually you do just like wander around in your underwear and t-shirt, which makes complete sense. It did seem that they were there. At this point, more people began showing up. They start calling around. They're looking through the address book because back then, no cell phone. You You have to pull out the person's address book. They're calling around, seeing if anybody's seen them. Stacy's mom then decides to call for an officer to be sent over. The police come on the scene around 9. At this time, there had already been between 18 to 20 people that had been in and out of the crime scene. Not very good when you're trying to connect the dots on missing people, pull evidence. Of course, they didn't know it was a crime scene, but that's going to make it very hard when you're trying to collect evidence, do an investigation. The crime scene has already just been completely tampered. There is also some talk that Janice had decided to clean up a bit. She had done some dishes. I don't know if maybe she was just like nervous while she was waiting there and thought maybe she'd help out. And she may even have vacuumed the house. So we literally have no crime scene.
Which was probably good intention, but
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't know.
Hopefully not.
The police do investigate the scene and they find there's no sign of a struggle. There's no furniture knocked over. I mean, the only thing we have is that broken globe on the porch.
That could be a sign of a struggle, I think.
Or maybe they were trying to bust the light out.
Oh, so like no one would see?
Yeah. And
yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. But as far as a struggle inside, nothing. No blood. So it's literally as if they just vanished. They just completely disappeared. Starting into the investigation, we're going to look at some suspects here and the course that the police took when investigating this. So first off, the police start to investigate Susie. So they're going to look into her life and kind of see if there's anything they can find within there. Like, does she have enemies? Would there be anybody that would possibly, want to come after her? During that, they did discover her boyfriend, Dustin, was actually in quite a bit of trouble. So remember that troublemaker we were talking about earlier? Yeah. It had seemed that him and some of his friends had actually been caught robbing graves.
Okay, of all things.
Mm-hmm.
Robbing, well, that's fascinating. It's not like, oh, he robbed the gas station or he, I don't know, beat up the neighborhood kid or whatever. He's robbing grave. What were they doing with these body parts?
Well, it was said that he was getting like gold scraps, like gold teeth and things.
Oh, so it wasn't like a spooky thing. It was a just degrade the grave thing.
And kind of like get whatever valuables were in the graves. So,
okay. Odd.
Yeah. I know, if you're going to rob something, like, just why graves?
Yeah, and it's like, how do you know who you're, like, what are the odds that you just continuously dig up the correct grave that does have gold teeth in it or a nice watch? It's like, it is such a gamble of what you're going to find, and you're probably not going to find much, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Susie, she did know about this, and this is what caused their breakup. During this breakup, she reported that she was very scared of him. He had even slashed her tires, which she did report to the police. And then she had also made a statement to the police regarding the grave robbing on March 5th, 1992. She was also supposed to testify in court on them. Mm-hmm. That brings us to our suspect, Dustin. The boyfriend and his friends were, of course, questioned, and they really did not have a good alibi. So at this point, they were asked to take a polygraph test. All of them passed. And again, if you look at polygraph tests, they're not 100% accurate to begin with. You can't really use them in court, things like that.
Yeah, so it's like...
Yeah, so they could have just been really good at lying and they passed that polygraph test. We really just don't know. Our next suspect here is going to be Bart. They looked into him. He was Susie's brother, and he was 9 years older than Susie. He's the one that had the falling out with the family. Mm-hmm. He didn't have a good past relationship. However, when he moved back to Springfield, this would have been in the spring before Susie went missing, so the spring of the year previous. It seemed like he was trying to mend the relationship. Him and Susie even moved in together for a little bit. This only lasted about 2 weeks. He said it was due to that boyfriend, issues with Dustin, the age difference, he said, played a part, partying problems, and just, problems between them. The police did question Bart, and he claims he had been out drinking the night before and that he was drunk the night of. When he got home, it was around 11 p.m., and he just passed out. We have another person of interest. Again, no witnesses, no real alibi. So police then also asked him to take a polygraph test, and he passed too and was let go.
Okay. They're really trustworthy of these polygraph tests.
It was the 90s. I kind of feel like in the 90s it was like the lie detector test. Well, you passed the lie detector. You can go.
Yeah, they probably thought people didn't realize that you could just pass it.
Yeah. Days later, an older woman came forward with a lead. So she was a neighborhood woman. So she was kind of like that. Picture that old lady that's always peeping out her window. She's always on her front porch. She's watching everything that's going on in the neighborhood.
That's me.
Yeah, you. So it's you. She reports to the police that a couple of days before the women went missing, she had seen a strange green van, probably about 1960s, 1970s, driving around the block. This van was driven by a woman with blonde hair who seemed to be distressed. And she had heard an aggressive man in the van saying, "Don't do anything stupid." She wasn't able to see the man, so she has no description of this man, only that he sounded very aggressive.
Okay.
So the police decide to go ahead and bring her in for some further questioning. And at this point, they show her the picture of the missing three. It's at this time she points to Susie and identifies her as the woman she had seen driving the van.
Oh, I wonder if the guy in it was the boyfriend.
Could have been. Very odd there. Now, this van actually became a huge deal. So the police start looking for this van. They even set up like some kind of campaign with a lookalike van that had a sign on it that said to call the police if you have information, if you've seen this van. Now, they did get some tips, but nothing useful. The tips of the van were like the right description, but not the correct color. Like literally every color but the color green.
Maybe the old lady had the green wrong.
That's the thing with eyewitness reports. Like, eyewitness reports are very iffy because you do tend to forget a lot.
Could have been almost like a bluish color. Like, I could have seen it as a blue, and she's like, well, it's green.
Yeah, exactly. We have that fight all the time when you ever play that game Yellow Car? When you're driving and whoever gets the most yellow cars wins. Oh, well, my family, we play yellow car, and you got to say it first. You got to be like yellow car, and it can't be repeated. There's lots of rules to it. But we get in arguments sometimes because it'll be like yellow car, and I'll be like, no, that's more like an orange. And it's like, no, it's not. That's completely yellow. Or it'll be like, that's more like a lime green. It's like, no, it's a yellow. So it is like kind of depends on how your eyes perceive that color. So that definitely could be what happened. After this, now about 6 months go by. It's now New Year's Eve, 1992. And it was at this point America's Most Wanted ran the case of the missing three. They said that a man did call in saying that he had information about this, but for some reason during the transfer of the call, it was lost. So it was either dropped or maybe the guy hung up. And in the 90s at this point, they just unfortunately were not able to trace the call back. That could have been a major detail. It could have been absolutely nothing at all. It could have been a prank. We will never know what that guy wanted to say to America's Most Wanted after that case aired.
Wow.
Yeah.
Of course.
Some other people of interest here that are outside of the family. We have in 1993, a man named Stephen Grayson, I do believe, came forward. Now, at this time, Stephen was currently incarcerated for a 40-year term for kidnapping and raping a college girl in 1993. He came to the police with this information, hoping that he could exchange information for a plea deal. Like, hey, if I give
Wow.
you some information, you cut some time off my current sentence. He had claimed that he had been at a party and a drunk friend of his came up to him and told him he had killed them. At first, of course, police are like, okay, good try. Stephen had also claimed that he knew where the bodies were. And the police began changing their minds about his statement when he was able to give them information that had not been released to the public. So
Oh.
we don't know what he knew, but he knew enough that they were like, okay, maybe this guy isn't just making up a story for a plea deal. Maybe this guy's actually got some information that we can use.
But we don't know any of that info?
We don't know what information he'd given
Ugh.
them that wasn't released to the public.
Why?
I mean, like this case, you can research it for 30 minutes. You can research it for an hour. There's so much information on this case to really get everything in every detail. So it may be out there and it may just be something that the source that I had didn't have that information. So as far as I know, we don't know. But again, we're innocent until proven guilty.
Uh-huh. Yes.
They did decide to take him to a few places. He was going to show them where he thinks they could be buried. He does bring them to a property that had recently been previously searched for another missing persons case. So 2 different cases going on here.
Okay, what's going on at that property?
So they were also thinking that maybe he got his information mixed up and maybe he was referring to that case they had just searched the property for. But again, we will never know about this because something was found on that property. But a gag order was put into place on the owner of the property as well as the evidence found. So nobody's allowed to talk about it.
I wonder why. That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it has potential to help this case or the other case or any case.
Exactly.
And was this missing person thing, was this other one related, or not related, was this other missing person case at the same time?
I don't know. I didn't dive in on that missing person case.
Yeah.
I just know there had been a previous person that went missing, and this property is where they thought that they should search, and he's brought them back here for the missing 3. So
Wow.
we will never know if it had anything to do with the missing 3, if it had something to do with something completely, like maybe not with either case. We'll just never know.
Wow. I really want to know what that one's about now.
I know, but there's a gag order. Moving into our next tip, this comes from Florida. Robert Cox, he was a former military ranger. He was actually born and raised in Springfield. He, however, was stationed in Florida in 1978. And during this time, he went on a family vacation in December of 1978. At this time, 19-year-old Sharon Sellers went missing. 4 days later, her car was found abandoned and she was found dead. She was so decomposed that they had to use dental records, but it was indicated that it was blunt force to her head that had caused the death. Now, on vacation, his mother did call the police reporting he had returned to the hotel with blood around his mouth. They took him to the hospital, and it was found that he had bit his tongue really bad.
Okay.
So he's missing like parts of his tongue. Like he really couldn't, so he really couldn't talk. So he was like writing down what had happened. He claims it was a fight, but that doesn't line up. There's no evidence that there was a fight. He claims that it happened in a public setting, so there should have been witnesses. There weren't. But where they had found her body was not far from the hotel at all. He was convicted of this crime. Things added up to like, dude, you got blood on you. Your tongue is like something happened. Same night that she went missing, the body was found close to the hotel you were staying at. You did it. But somehow his verdict got overturned. When that happened, he did move back to Springfield. And when he moved back to Springfield, this was right before the girls went missing.
Oh.
Coincidentally, he had even worked with Stacy's dad at the same dealership.
Oh. Not weird at all.
No. He did claim the day of the disappearance, he was at a golf tournament. And that evening, he went out to dinner with his girlfriend. And she held that alibi that, yes, they were out to dinner that evening together. Later down the timeline, however, he was arrested in Texas for armed robbery.
Oh, Texas.
And at this time, of course, that girlfriend is now his ex-girlfriend. She decides she's going to retract her statement. And she says he was not with her that evening. Police go to Texas to interview him, and he won't talk. So he's like, nope, he's not answering questions. Now, later on in 1996, Robert was being interviewed by some news reporters about the missing three, and he would say something very odd. He would say, quote, "I know they're dead." After this, again, police, they're questioning him. He refuses to talk about it. He's starting to say really weird things like he can't talk about this until his mother is dead.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't know
But
why.
Did she die?
As far as I know, no.
It sounds like a like Norman Bates kind of thing.
It's got a little bit of that creep factor to it, doesn't it?
That's exactly what my mind went to.
Yeah, so he's not going to talk about it until his mother dies. And yeah, to this day, he's still considered a person of interest. So maybe.
But is he in jail still?
No, he is out. Yeah. So, because he had a report with police or with the news reporters in 96, and that's when he made that little odd comment.
Why would you say that?
I know.
Unless he had really nothing to do with it, and he's just like, because after a certain amount of time, in a lot of cases, a lot of people start to just assume that the victims are no longer just missing, that they are in fact dead. So maybe that's what he was getting at. Like, what does it matter? Like, I know they're dead. Like, maybe he was just being a jerk about it.
I mean, this would only have been 3 years later.
Well, yeah, but
I don't know. It's very odd. It's very odd.
It is. I mean, especially considering all the weird circumstances of all of that, especially coming back to the area and working at the same place as the dad. But that also kind of brings me back a little bit to the brother, who also came back to the area right before this went down.
Well, he came back in the spring before. So he'd been there for like a good year.
But still back.
Yeah, but still back, and they had a fallout. So it just seems like we have got a lot of good persons of interest, but not. It's not
nothing that's like, this one's ringing. They all ring a little bit, but none of them are sounding the alarm too much.
Exactly. Now, this one is, I mean, you could take this as real or attention seeker. We'll see what you think about Kathy here. So many years later, we have Kathy. She's a journalist, and she would report that she had gotten a tip from someone who claimed that they had seen the three missing in a vision or a dream. And they had claimed that they were buried in a parking lot garage of a hospital. The hospital that she's talking about at the time of the disappearance, this parking lot would have just been dirt. So it wasn't built yet.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So investigators, they're not going to take this serious. Like, what are going to take? Like, if I went to an investigator and say, hey, this person told me that they had a dream that they're under this parking lot. It's like, okay.
So Kathy wasn't even the supposed psychic.
No.
That makes it definitely weirder.
Yeah. At this point, like I said, the investigators, they're not taking this serious. They're not going to look into it. And it seems at that point, even if it's true, what are they going to do about it? Are they going to blow up the parking garage? Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
So Kathy decides she's going to hire a mechanical engineer to scan the parking lot.
Way to go, Kathy. Take it upon yourself.
She did. She also recorded this the whole time as well, so that she would have evidence and not just, hearsay of what was on the scan. Now, the engineer does find 3 spots on the scan that he says look the same as when he goes over old graves with that scanner.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But if we're thinking about it logically, if the construction was done after the girls went missing, then the site would have had to been
Unless it already
excavated.
had been before they got buried.
No. So at the time, that's the timeline kind of doesn't line up because at this point it would have just been land.
Oh, before the
And
project even begun.
mm-hmm.
So
So
they would have had to have been dug incredibly deep.
yeah. Well, even then, because you got to think how deep they dig that to. They put in that wood area first, the
Yeah.
base, and then they fill it with concrete. They dig pretty deep, so it's more than likely that the construction people would have discovered this at that point. So we don't know with that whether maybe the construction people didn't dig deep enough. Maybe Kathy's a fraud, but Kathy kind of loses her integrity, loses her credibility, should I say. She comes on a podcast years later, and the interview is
Hours?
no, we're not having Kathy. Well, Kathy's not invited.
Okay. Damn.
No, Kathy. But she comes on this podcast and she is very odd. So she's talking cryptic and she seems like very uncomfortable, just really, really weird. And she keeps saying that she's afraid of her safety. I mean, the whole vibe is strange. And she claims to know who did it and where they are, but she can't tell until the case is solved.
Well, but duh. Like, that's how you would know who it is. That doesn't make sense.
So yeah, she loses her credibility there. I mean,
Rightfully so. Okay.
how much credibility did she have to begin with? Was she just trying to get attention from this?
She's one of those people who, for whatever reason, gets really weirdly attached to a case and considers themselves in some way or another involved.
Maybe.
There has to be a name for that. Like, that has to be a certain disorder, in my opinion.
Oh, I would think so. Maybe she just became very invested in this and
Yeah.
wanted to be a part of it.
Convinced herself.
Well, she became a part of it, so she got her wish, if that was the case.
Her invitation to this podcast has been revoked.
It's revoked, Kathy. We can't have that craziness on here. So, we've got 2 more leads that come in much later down the line. 2002, a tip lead came into investigators that reported a similar looking van from an eyewitness at a concrete company. Investigators do bring cadaver dogs down to the scene. The dogs do find bones. However, it's determined that the bones are way too old to be that of those 3. So,
Human bones.
yes. So not this case, somebody else's case.
That's so weird. This case keeps getting connected to other cases.
It is weird.
Not connected, but accidentally linked in certain, accidental little moments. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, little things here and there. And then finally, I think this is the last bit of evidence we have so far, is that in 2003, a tip leads police to investigate a farm. This was about an hour away from there. At this farm, it was said that they did find blood and what could have been a piece of the van, but the blood was found to be inconclusive. So,
okay. I mean, could just be a bad sample or could be police cover up.
could be, but again, they weren't able to really go anywhere with that lead either. So, as for the missing 3, it was in June of 1997. So, even though they are still considered missing on file, the 3 are legally declared dead. And as for now, the case is still unsolved and no new tips have come in. So, that is the case of the missing 3.
Well, okay, so I kind of think I know who I think most likely of the suspects would be the one to have done it. I want to know, who do you think?
I think out of all of them, I'm going to say the crazy guy from Florida. I mean,
Yeah, that one's a little much.
I think maybe he might have. He's already done it once before. How he got off on that crime, like, I don't know. But it was overturned. But he's already killed once before. How is it that whoever this was entered into this home and all three women left with them? There's no evidence of a struggle. There's no evidence that they were killed there and taken. They left, I wouldn't say willingly, but they cooperated
Cooperated.
and left with this person. Why don't we not have that nosy neighbor? She didn't see nothing. Like, there's no
Yeah.
witnesses
They
tonight.
had to have known the person. And
Mhm.
this person, whoever it was, it seemed like they would have had easy access. Nothing was busted except for the globe
Yeah.
outside, which, I mean, that could point to so many things, I guess. But I agree with what you said earlier that it kind of seemed like maybe they were trying to bust the light so that there was a little more darkness so they could be concealed. But I don't know. I feel like the fact that there wasn't that much of an obvious struggle left behind, that tells me it was someone they know. I kind of keep coming back to the grave robbing boyfriend.
You think him and his friends are smart enough to pull that off?
See, that's the problem with it is they're teenagers. It's like, okay. And there have been cases where teens get away with it, but this seems like such a smoothly executed crime. And maybe it's not as smooth as it seems, and maybe it's something everyone's missing.
The crime scene was completely unusable by the time the police got there. 18 to 20 people in and out. It had been cleaned. If there was any sort of DNA, anything that they would have been able to find, who's to say it wasn't out of the 18 to 20 people there? Also, they've only been in that house for 2 months. So who's to say that if they did find DNA or they did find evidence, it wasn't from the previous homeowners?
Yeah. Or you know what? Maybe it's something just super random gone wrong. Maybe the previous owners were in on something, and maybe whoever did this grabbed the wrong girls. And maybe they thought, like, they get there and they're like, oh, wait, we're looking for the people who used to live here. Well, we're already here. Get in the car, you know?
Yeah, that there's been a couple of cases that's been the case. It was found the person wasn't supposed to die. It was actually misidentification.
Mm-hmm. But see, in that case, it's like you're not getting the person you want to get. To me, they would have taken the money in that case too.
That's true.
It's a personal thing. They would most likely take the cash. It's someone who knows them. It has to be someone who knows them.
Yeah, personal vendetta, you're so focused on your anger. You have this planned exactly for this reason. Passionate.
Yeah.
Where crimes that are just random, I feel you're going to take the money, rob them of this and that, force them here. Like, who's going to know she had $900 in their purse?
I also think it's odd. Of course, maybe they did scream and just no one heard it. But the fact that no neighbors reported hearing a scream or a car screech off or smashing of anything makes me think that they either did something to them, like were able to sneak up on them and drug them, maybe, or...
Oh, I didn't even think about that. What if they did, like, chloroform them or inject them with something? Because if...
Yeah, mid-sleep, they could have gone in and done it.
And just carried them out.
And if it was someone who knew them, maybe they knew where the hideaway key was, or if they've been stalking them out, which to me, it seems like they had been watched, especially considering those creepy phone calls, considering the phone call that came in at the time the other people were there and it kept calling. And it also seems weirdly strategic that it happened after the girls got back to the house. Not like they didn't come back to see the mom was missing. Cheryl was a mom. Yes, she was a mom. They didn't come back and see her missing. They come back and then they all go missing afterwards. So it seems like it was kind of a stakeout to me.
It would make sense, like you said, that it's somebody they knew. And I mean, maybe it was the teen. She's a witness. She probably, if you're dating somebody, she probably knew a lot of information on him. That he was like, if she's testifying, we're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, also, I don't hold it against someone who's grave robbing.
Me neither. But also, what if the brother had a vendetta too?
Maybe the brother and the teens were in on it together.
Who knows?
But why was the brother out to get the friend?
Well, you got to think about this as well. So here's another thing. The girls were not supposed to be there that night.
Oh, yeah.
They were supposed to be at a hotel in Branson. And then they were going to go to the water park. And the next morning, the hotel in Branson changes to Janelle's house. And last minute, this would be around 2 a.m. Janelle's house changes back to Susie. So technically, Cheryl was supposed to be the only one that was there. So why would the boyfriend come for Cheryl?
You're right. I'm sitting here trying to think as if we're going to solve this case right now.
Who got this?
I don't know. This one, as I kept going, the story, I kept remembering it more. I really thought this was one where people went into the woods and went missing. I thought this was a very different case. But this is one that I've always really thought deeply about because it just, nothing adds up.
We've got 3 missing people, no evidence, no sign of a struggle, all their stuff there. Also, 2 of them weren't supposed to be there, so...
Unless it was just great timing and they figured it out and they're like, maybe they were like, oh, we're going to go to her house. And someone at the party was like, oh, you are? And told.
Well, they didn't change their mind about Janelle's until they got to Janelle's house and realized that Janelle's family had come in. And
Maybe
now there was no place.
Maybe it's just a creepy neighbor.
Maybe it was just a random. I mean, it's too well planned out for it to be random. And the money, again, we could just go in circles about this all night, I feel like.
Maybe they were really just after Cheryl, but the girls just happened to be there, so they were part of it, sadly.
You got Cheryl's missing ex-husband. I think
there's a red flag there to me, personally.
I didn't find anything about him being a suspect.
When I've heard this case before, I've never heard anything about him. Not saying that, I think it's him, but I do find it odd that it wasn't discussed in any time I've heard about this case. Now I remember I have looked into this one a few times, and each time I just sit and I'm like, what is it? This is one of those cases that just kind of lives in your head.
It's really a rabbit hole in this one. We'll wrap it up, and that is the case of the Springfield Missing 3. So,
well, you certainly delivered.
It's got a lot of pivot points and points of interest, and of course, a complete mystery that to this day we don't know.
I think we will one day. I feel like this case something will come out.
I sure hope so. Hopefully, we do get some closure for the people involved and friends and families, things like that.
Well, until the updates happen.
Until so. I guess at this point, though, we'll call it a wrap. Yep. We dove, we plunged, we swam around in it for a little bit.
For a while. A lot of swimming in this one.
There's a lot of swimming. We went very deep in this one.
Yeah.
But I guess with that, we'll say good night. Pleasant nightmares.
Good night.
Good night.